Well, welcome to our first panel on the main stage. Today, my name is Jean-François Bélanger, and I'm going to be your host for the entire day on this particular panel. Today, I'm very happy to be able to introduce the chairman of CISA, Derek Harp. Derek is the founder and chairman of CISA, a 501c6 nonprofit cybersecurity workforce development association with more than 26,000 members worldwide. Derek was first introduced to the security field while serving as a U.S. naval officer, and since 1997 went on to co-found, advise, invent, and invest in more than a dozen companies, organization, and new products. He is the former co-founder of the ICS program at the SANS Institute and founding co-chair of JICSP certification. Derek is also a PIDI scuba instructor, very nice, and a 22-year member of the Entrepreneur Organization. He resides in Atlanta, Georgia, with his wife and his son, as today he's going to present us a presentation called Optimizing Resource Allocation in Control Cyber System Security Programs. Derek, it's all yours. Thank you.
All right, is this microphone working as well? Okay, good. So I'm excited to be here. I'm going to put this down, but I just want to say I'm going to be sharing data from our annual report. It does exist in a physical copy, but it's most often shared by PDF. And the PDF is a free global download, but there is a real report. So our association is sort of an accidental discovery around peer groups, people all around the world, wrestling with control system cybersecurity. We define control system very broadly. So any sort of system that has pumps or valves, actuators, moving parts, cyber to physical elements. So whether that's Industry 4.0 or industrial control systems or control systems, Internet of Things or industrial Internet of Things, all those systems would fall within what we would call our area of concern and interest, non-traditional networks. And so the folks that are tasked to secure those come from all kinds of backgrounds. There's a whole host of different concerns and constraints than traditional IT networks have, and you have gear and equipment that's maybe 20 years old in many of these applications. So it behaves fundamentally different than traditional IT networks, and the problems and challenges and the staffing issues around that reflect that. And so the goal for our association is to recruit more people to this specific workforce and then to professionally support people in the control system cybersecurity workforce, from entry level all the way up to our senior decision makers. And some of their needs might be different, so we're rolling out more programs to sort of help support the professional staff secured that are charged in securing our critical control systems. And so this was, again, started with one meeting in Atlanta, Georgia, which is where I happen to live in the United States. And then it spread to Houston, Texas, and Washington, D.C. And there was no grand plan. There was no business plan. What we found is we were tapping into this same issue. I want to get together and talk across the table with someone else. You may be in water, and I may be in petroleum, or an oil refinery, and you might be cardboard manufacturing. But what's common, or what could we share? What reference architectures? And does your industry have any regulations that you're mapping to? We don't have any. All these sorts of exchanges, and then it just was another city and another city and another city, and then we realized, there's something here, and that's when we formed a nonprofit organization, and we had to sort of build a framework or a structure to support this one city after another, and people reaching out and saying, hey, can we start a meeting like you're doing in Houston in our location? So we're about roughly 50% North America, but the rest is distributed around the world and growing quite rapidly. We have over 6,000 people just in our Asia Pacific region alone. And the problem is truly global. Regional approaches are different, government programs are different, regulatory approaches are different, but the problem is clearly a global problem, and there's no difference globally to people who are thinking about it. There's maybe more people in some countries thinking about it or being paid to work on it than in other countries, but there are people everywhere going, what do we do about this? So the goal of the research part of our nonprofit platform is that we're in a perfect position. We're not selling a product. I've been a vendor for 25 years, and now I'm not. And so a lot of doors are open to us, and we have a lot of people in our community, so we can do polling, and we can do surveying, and we can bring all that information back, and we can sort of look at what we have, and then we can turn that back out. And so we have a sponsorship model so that we can give those products back out to the community for free, because corporations are supporting us financially. And this particular report is sponsored by a number of organizations. The title sponsor is KPMG. So they've just signed up to do their third year with us of helping create and curate and do this report. So we do the heavy lifting, and there's a committee. Well, I may mention this in a minute. So the goal of the research program is to, again, gather the wisdom and churn out decision support tools, things that people can look and say, benchmarking-wise, what are people doing in different industries? What are they doing in different geographies? And maybe they need to substantiate a business decision that they are either making or they're proposing to make and need to get buy-in for. So this report is produced by a steering committee of 19 members, made up of different companies and organizations. So it's an annual process, from the surveying to looking at the data to writing the narrative. Again, KPMG is the title sponsor, supported by Waterfall and Fortinet as the next level, and then there's another half a dozen sponsors involved in doing it, and this is how we can give it away for free. The QR code is where the download is located. It's also on our website, cs2ai.org, and we had 550 respondents in the last, in the group that went into this year's report. You can see a little bit of how it's distributed. It is a highly educated group. It is a highly decision maker and what we call influencers, people who are directly reporting to decision makers and helping inform those decisions. And so we're always looking at where people are coming from. The survey for next year's report was just launched. If anybody's willing to take it, we would love to have you in the survey. It is anonymous. We don't care to know who somebody is. We're sort of aggregating all the data. It's available at the top of our webpage, again, cs2ai.org, but you can see who participated last time. So this is one of the structural frameworks of the survey. We ask people, and this will be important, I'll explain sort of how we use this. We ask them to self-attest to what level of program maturity they have. And again, this is cybersecurity for control system program maturity, not broad-based cybersecurity. And so it's not surprising that there's many immature organizations. This does vary by vertical. There are more mature verticals and less mature verticals. We've organized around 19 verticals, so oil and gas, being one, manufacturing being one. So we ask people to sort of self-attest to what sort of program maturity they have. Then we do compare some of the answers and say what was true about the people who said, honestly, we're a 1 or a 2, we're very immature. What was maybe a different, were there any material differences in some of the questions? So somebody said, we're very mature. And there are, and I'll share some of those with you. So this was asking, what are your priorities? So this is up front early on, what are your priorities? And you can see tied for first place is safety. Safety for our own people, safety for our community. That's not too surprising. Obviously, industry, safety in industry is a very mature practice. Nobody in most industrial settings would go into a plant without wearing their personal protective equipment, a hard hat or what you will. That's been worked into the culture. And there's well-known consequences to not doing what you're supposed to do there. And we know the signs that say it's been 1,368 days since our last incident. We don't have the equivalent security culture, which is another sort of interesting discussion area. But so safety is still a goal, and you can think of some verticals that being more important than others. But what are the others? Second place is protecting continuous operations, and we know that's key, right? There are either places that must stay continuous. You think about utilities that may only go down for 6 hours this year in November, on a specific day, and we're not going to go down other than that. Then you have also places that can quantify, they may be in less critical industries for us as end users, but they can quantify that every minute that they're down, what that costs them. And they may be producing or manufacturing some sort of normal product, but every minute they're down is costing them. And so that's clearly a big deal. And then we see emerging protecting trade secrets and protecting product quality. And this is increasing. Those are tied also for the third place. But those numbers are going up over the years, and people are looking at, we don't have to have any sort of fear, uncertainty, and doubt event, an explosion. We just have theft of our process. how we assemble things, the order we assemble things, the ingredients we assemble things. Even if you could glean all of that out in a reconnaissance phase, that's got significant value to potential third parties. And the goal of anybody like that, when we think about adversaries, is to be completely undetected. And so people sometimes ask, why aren't we seeing more explosions? There's a lot of threat actors who the exact opposite of what they want to accomplish is anything visible, anything where they are detected. And so that area is clearly an example of that, of go undetected as long as possible. So this is an interesting slide. I'm sharing just some of the data from the report. The report has more charts and graphs and statistics, and I'm just sharing some of the elements today. This is interesting. Let's talk about threat actors. And I'm as interested as anybody in nation state exotic scenarios, but let's face it, that is not the number one, for most of us, the number one threat actor. The two bars to the left are insiders, two different types. The far left is a negligent insider. We sort of separated. We realized early on in the process of this research that there were insiders who weren't trying to do bad things, but ended up introducing and creating opportunity for bad things to happen. And then the second bar is malicious insiders. Now this can just be very non-sophisticated. I got fired. I'm angry. I go home. I tunnel back into one manufacturing facility, a Georgia-based multi-billion-dollar company a few years ago, and I tunnel back into one manufacturing plant, and I can do $1 million of damage, right away, very, very short time frame. This person's in prison. They were able to figure out, attribution in this case was done, but there's nothing sexy about that. It's just access and identity management sort of issue, policy and procedure issue. It wasn't sophisticated, and it was a person who still had credentialed access even though they'd been fired. So I think this is important, and sometimes when I comment on this, it gets misinterpreted. I'm not downplaying that there are advanced nation-state capabilities. In fact, there are over 100, at last count, over 100 information warfare capabilities being created in 100 countries, different levels of sophistication. That's real, but I think if we're in a prioritization environment, we can't do everything. That's not typically where most of us would focus. We might focus on some lower hanging fruit, and that would be the insider who's sort of pissed off, or could include them. This is, some of my slides seem to have been not imported very well. Don't know what happened there. So this is attack vectors, and they're all cut off. The top one is phishing. So that was interesting when we think of sort of control networks, there's still some thought process around, well, these are different, increasingly they are connected, and there's a lot of nexus. There's opportunity for individuals, insiders, non-malicious insiders, to click on links and do things, and for that to have a nexus or connection with what might have traditionally been a separate network. Now that's the basis for really the rise and concern in this area, is those barriers, those separations between IT networks and business networks and outside, and vendors needing to tunnel directly back into a turbine to keep it under warranty. Those separations, the idea of air gapping is pretty much eliminated now. And so phishing is still big. These are all the different attack vectors, and I'm sorry that they got cut off. In the report you can see more detail. So this will vary from company to company and where their exposures are, but we just thought it was interesting that phishing came out on top. So this is an interesting one where we said before you acquire new technology, what kind of things are you doing? All my slides are cut off. Yeah. So this one is, if you look at the lower categories, these are around, I would categorize them as putting hard questions to the vendors. And so that could be a sophisticated process. The questionnaires, by the way, I don't think any of this is it's a magic silver bullet, one size fits all, like you should, do this and you'll be safe. Don't misinterpret anything that I'm saying. This is saying this is what the ground truth is, this is what people are doing, this is where they're investing their time and money. All of these things, depending on how you implement them, can be of high or low quality. But there is a trend of asking my suppliers tougher questions, asking them, especially now that supply chain is getting more and more scrutiny, what is your process? Do you have a secure development lifecycle process? You're developing product that has other people's product in it, but you're also writing code. It's definitely from my relationships at major equipment manufacturers, they said behind the scenes, we're really going to make more progress when more pressure is put on us by our customers. You know, we're doing what we can. Sometimes these are the security stakeholders, so they're feeling very enthusiastic about the progress they're making. But if they have to be honest, they said our company will make more investment in cybersecurity when more of our customers basically demand it of us. You know, it's business. Also, another thing in some of these statistics, so in this case, this is one of the first slides where the blue is the high maturity respondents and the orange is the low maturity respondents. That also is not just, well, everybody should be doing more. The budgets at some high maturity respondents are going to be larger. So this is a benchmark, or it is a way to see what people who have the ability and means, where they're putting their time and their money. But again, prioritization is key. It can't just be, well, all people who think they're level 5 or are level 5, they're doing all these things, I should do those too, is an oversimplification. It's certainly not the interpretation that I would want people to walk away from it. But it does give you a roadmap. You can see where people are putting their energy. So, I'm sorry, folks. Looks like my slides got all cut off when I sent them up. I'll do my best to sort of remember what all these are. You definitely have to download the report. I'll try to do from memory what everything is, but the report is free and it's got all this in there and more. So this is talking about assessments. So a slide that I'm not even sharing, we did ask about how often people are doing assessments. And we were surprised at first in the second year that we did it, that annual assessments went down by enough that it was the bar chart changed. We're like, oh, people are doing less annual assessments. And then we started looking at all the data. Quarterly, semi-annual, and monthly all went up. So there definitely was a trending towards frequency of assessment is increasing, especially in the more mature organizations that can afford to do it from a money and time perspective. That's where things are headed. And I've had a number of decision makers that I do the interviews with and I talk one-on-one with to sort of augment this research. And they say, yeah, one point in time is no longer any good. You do an annual assessment, there's just so much time between doing that and the next year that you're going to do it. We don't find any value in that at all. We want to do it and have more of a real time. It's where some are trying to head, more of a real time, or at least as close to that as they can afford to get. At the bottom of this chart, the high maturity organizations are buying more technology. That's what the bottom graph is, the adoption of additional and new technologies. Again, more mature organization may be coming from a company that has the budgets to do that, but that's ultimately what they're doing post-assessment and to a greater degree than low maturity organizations. And so this is a chart of what kind of technology they're investing in. I added this due to questions last time I presented this. People said, well, what kind of technology are people investing in? So you see unidirectional gateway or data diodes, not twice as much, but almost that. Firewalls are sort of close to the same percentage, no matter how mature or not the organization is. And that makes sense. That's a technology that's more developed. Next-gen firewalls, almost twice as much for the high maturity respondents. And so you get an idea there around sort of the difference between capabilities and where people are putting their money. So this question was around the greatest obstacles to reducing control system cybersecurity attack surfaces. And so in there are budget, access to staff. So we do know that there's not enough people. The statistics were a little interesting on expertise and human resources, but it is a problem. It's a problem in overall cybersecurity, as we know. Well, within control system cybersecurity, it's no better, or potentially it's worse. You want to have multidiscipline. I mean, the people who truly understand the control system cybersecurity understand operating technology, and they understand cybersecurity. That's two disciplines. And more often than not, we have somebody strong in one and not as strong in another. So when you have these individuals that really know both and how they interlock and how they work together, that's a rarer breed, and that's harder to find. So this is sort of listing out the different obstacles that the companies are feeling. There was a decrease in sort of management support, senior management support or buy-in. So it looks like we are getting, unfortunately, incidents are helping wake up more and more senior non-security people around the risk in their portfolio, which helps the departments and downstream folks that have to implement these things when they get more support from above. This was budgets. We saw a decrease to the top two categories, which are the large increases, 30 more than 50%, more than 30% increase year to year on cybersecurity for control system budgets. So it looks like there's maybe a little bit of a pullback. Moderate increase, 10%, did continue to go up. So this is a benchmarking that's important for anybody that's out there saying, our budget's being increased in this area? The answer is for sure. If they didn't know that already, yes. We have enough respondents, statistical validity. We know budgets are increasing. That makes sense. They're increasing again in some verticals more than others. But potentially, we'll see in the next year's data, the large increases seemingly are slowing down. This is two different things that people have asked about, and so I wanted to share. Managed security services, in a nutshell, on the left, we're seeing an increase in managed security services, especially in high maturity respondents. I think there's an argument, though, that's going to be made for low maturity respondents, too, that they can't afford to have the team or even find enough people to have the team to do monitoring, and monitoring is definitely on the rise. Well, who's getting those alerts? Who's getting alerted to the anomalies or the activity in a control network that a human being should take action on? So we're going to see, and I think the data is saying this, and my own anecdotal and all the interviews and discussions I have in the industry, we're going to see more managed security services. Organizations that can stand up the full expense of a 24-hour center, but then spread that cost across multiple customers. That's going to make sense for a lot of customers, and it seems like that is on the rise. Monitoring, specific safe to run technology in the control environments is now available. It wasn't 10 years ago. Part of my entrepreneurial path was I was involved in a monitoring solution company early on. We were having to tell people it was safe to run our solution. A lot of argument or discussion around, we won't mess up the network. That genie's pretty much out of the bottle. There's a number of providers that have well-vetted, safe to run in the OT network monitoring solutions. They can be protocol aware in many cases, understand industrial protocols, and understand changes to the industrial protocol that shouldn't be happening. So there's a level of sophistication now available there, and there's a rise in those. If you don't know what's going on in that network, how can you react to it? So that's not entirely surprising to me, having had some background 10 years ago in the space. I'm glad to see it's finally sort of taking off. So best return on investments. So this is a question around not only, we ask the early questions, where are you spending money? But then we say, so what? This is where you're spending money. Where are you seeing the biggest return? And this is a new area where we're trying to figure out, just because you've spent money in one place, maybe there's places where you underspent, but you see a bigger return on investment. That's important for people to know. And so we're sort of looking at that. Again, this is sort of graded by the maturity respondents in blue and the low maturity respondents in orange. Network segmentation. Everybody more or less is saying, yeah, we're working on it, but the high maturity respondents are absolutely investing in that. If we're going to have an incident, which is a safe assumption to say we'll have some kind of incident, we're never going to reach a space where there's no incidents. There's no arriving at a destination where we've made it, we're secure. That doesn't exist. So if we do have an incident, can we reduce the exposure? Can we reduce the damage, the area of effect? That seems key, and network segmentation is certainly helping with that. Say, well, you had an incident, some sort of compromise, but it didn't affect all of our operation because you can't get to everything from this one place. The bottom one is interesting. This is collaboration between different team members, different OT, IT is sometimes the term being used. There's still a lot of dysfunction. And so the high maturity respondents, basically where our interpretation of the data is they've already made significant progress. Again, I talk to lots of people weekly in the field. I think that's true. The high maturity respondents, they have cross-functional teams. They've gotten people together. They're getting people to build trust. I've been to some places where the IT team and the OT team, there was huge dysfunction. And that's clearly not the way forward. We've got to get people working together and trusting each other. So this is forecasting where they're going to put more money. And so this is, you can see here, vulnerability management is really high for the low maturity respondents. The only thing we figure there is that maybe the high maturity respondents have already felt they've made pretty good progress in this area. It can't be that it's a low priority. It must just be a lower priority after taking action maybe in some of the previous years for the high maturity respondents. But threat detection, network segmentation you see is a big winner. Supply chain security. So we see more investment in supply chain, specific supply chain program. I think we're going to see more of that, right? SolarWinds was a big eye-opener. Like, the stuff we buy has stuff inside it made by other people, which has stuff inside that made by other people, and the security is only as strong as we understand that whole set of linkages. And if there's open source software libraries that have embedded somewhere in here that got rolled into all this, what are we actually acquiring? What are we actually putting in our environment? And do we understand that whole chain? That's clearly a big deal. And so companies that can afford to do it are standing up programs around that. That's clearly something that a lot of companies aren't going to be able to do. I do think everybody has to get conversant, at least at any level, even if there's no budget to have a program in this area, nobody can afford, I think, in any cybersecurity position to not at least know what's going on and being able to discuss it in any sort of meeting or management setting, because there is a lot going on in that space. I think it's a frontier. There's a sort of exciting new opportunities, and there's going to be some stuff that'll work, and there'll be some stuff that won't. There's different standards, and so we'll have to see where it all nets out. So this is my last slide. I just drew a real quick stick figure to end on something that isn't statistics, but just my own personal view. Having been in cybersecurity since 1997, back 20 years ago, there's no maturity OT cyber, control system cybersecurity programs and people. Sort of those bottom curves, they didn't exist. We were worried about banks, and banks were the buyers of cybersecurity technology, in the 90s. And I don't know that very many people, other than some research labs and maybe some government folks, were thinking about very specific control systems. Well, maybe we're in the middle somewhere now. And so the idea is that obviously vulnerabilities, threats, threat actors, incidents focused on control systems, they're all on the rise. No matter whose data, our data, other parties' data, they're on the rise for lots of reasons. There's geopolitical reasons, there's profit reasons. Cyber criminals are recognizing, their opportunity is pretty golden in this subsector. And so what am I projecting here? I'm not projecting less threats. I'm not projecting less vulnerabilities. Our attack surfaces are multiplying. The problem is getting more challenging, not trying to solve a fixed problem. We're trying to solve a problem that's actually, enlarging itself. But could we get to a place where the damage, this idea of this circle is we've invested in people and we've invested in programs and we were able to mitigate the damage. So we won't see less threats and threat actors, but we could limit their damage. And that's probably the best we can arrive at, is that we can control incidents and make them smaller. Our responsiveness to them can go up. We're not, knee-jerk reaction. We have a plan. We break glass, we pull the plan out, we act quickly. A lot of damage can be mitigated in how we react to something, and that we can get to this place where it's predictably, safer and statistically safer. And that's going to be definitely key. It's going to be investing in our people. So thank you. I hope this was useful and interesting. Am I out of time, or any questions? Any questions? I got 2 minutes, I've been told.
Hello. My name is Benoit Brosseau. I'm the director of, I'm sorry, I'm going to remove those. Okay, I'm the director of IT for a school district near Montreal. We're responsible for training. We have the National Center for Water Purification, where people get trained for that. Crane drivers, lots of different type of networks are deployed in the organization. Up to a couple of years ago, there was low collaboration, like you talked between OT and IT in the organization, and now we're responsible for security in the OT network. I'd like to hear you talk about, as an IT guy coming into this world, frankly, I'm shocked by the quality of the code and the security practices that are in place in OT networks from vendors that are, not stuff that is 20 years ago, stuff that is delivered today, and it never would fly in the IT world. So what do you see as driving forces to increase quality? And I've talked to some of those guys, and I understand they work in an industrial complex. Now product has to be connected, and yeah, exactly. So
okay. Yeah, let me try to address that. How many people here are IT, not OT? Information technology, traditional cybersecurity, and how many people OT or control system cybersecurity? Okay. Yeah, so it's an interesting question around the maturity of this space. And so I crossed over from traditional IT cyber in 2011-ish, let's say, and it is like stepping back in time to some degree. There is less maturity. So I'm an optimist. Progress is being made, certainly in the 10-year lens that I've got. I'd like to say we were here, and now the community's here. But if you look at it as a whole, there's a lot of immaturity. So you're talking about vendors producing equipment without cybersecurity in mind. Today, no major equipment manufacturer is going to say they're doing that. They, to various degrees, they are investing in cybersecurity. But there's so much legacy. There are engineers, people creating things that weren't trained. It's like, I'm going to create something and I need to think about cybersecurity while I make this. They were about making the thing work. And maybe reliability, resiliency, it's going to work. It's going to work exactly the way, predictable. All those things get delivered on, right? They're all there in industry, and we see them working day in, day out, very predictably, and they produce all sorts of things for us that we need. That cybersecurity element is a retrofit. And so it's a retrofit on those technologies. It's a retrofit on a lot of current engineers. I hope the next generation of engineers, I want to create stuff that's predictable, reliable, resilient, and cyber secure from day one. But that's not the legacy we've inherited.
Join me, and yes, a good hand for Derek. Thank you very much.